this a dance?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I was trying to do a backstroke. Like, I don't think that's a dance. It's only in the pool type of thing.
Right? Well, and it probably doesn't translate well on like on little
Mm,
boxes, right? I
no,
think
you're
that's one of
right.
the ones that might translate in person better, but
You're
that's
right.
okay, right?
How are you doing this week?
That may be part I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. What about
Oh,
you?
of course. I'm good. I'm grateful to be here. Episode 122. I'm super excited.
What? What?
Yes.
Right? 100 episode 122 is almost as hot as it is in Texas.
Phew. And it's
You
hot.
know, I read it was 130 degrees in Death Valley, California, this week, right?
Wow.
We are having some of the hottest temperatures on record. And the reason I bring up Texas is because that's where I am streaming in from today.
Yes. Yes.
And yesterday we were driving through West Texas and it was 107 degrees.
Mm. Did you have to do anything different for your hydration, or did you just make sure that you had water?
Oh, I was hydrating. I
So do
was
you
I
do
was watering.
electrolytes?
Sometimes
What
I
did
do
you do?
coconut water.
Mhm.
Sometimes I do, and what I really try to do is not what I add, but what I take away. Because I
Okay.
have a little love of caffeine, and
Yes.
caffeine is a dehydrator. So
Ooh.
really making sure, like I still had my coffee, I still had my
Mhm.
tea, but I didn't do more than that, right?
Okay. That's
You
good to
know,
know because we're
right?
getting ready to travel, and, I did do coconut water when we were at the
Hmm.
pool for the family reunion, so that makes sense, but I
Hmm.
hadn't considered what to take away. I've only been thinking about, "Let me make sure I add even more hydration," so that's good.
Right, it's huge because,
Mhm.
before I was on this road trip back, I was in Colorado, and
Yeah.
it's really easy to get dehydrated at high altitude.
Mhm.
And my sister recently had a bout with extreme dehydration that came out of the blue, and it was really scary. Like, and
Mm.
she's really used to paying attention to that. So this time of year, especially when the temperatures are up, we all need to be paying attention to it because
Yeah.
it can be like she ended up in the ER.
How's she
So
doing? That's what I was gonna
she's
ask you.
doing well. Yeah,
Good.
she's doing well, but it was
Katie,
scary.
I'm
It was
so glad you feel better.
right.
Yeah.
And if you're listening, I'm sorry, I just announced all your medical stuff across. Well,
We love you.
actually we'll cut it out when we do the post
Okay.
production. We love you,
Okay.
Katie.
Yes. Sending love, holding space for all the ladies to be hydrated. Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
Right?
So,
Are we ready to kick
let's
off this official episode of 122?
that's what I was gonna say, absolutely. Hi, ladies. I am Shannon Mitchell, a Black millennial entrepreneur and Amazon bestselling author, the founder of Shalo Glow, an all-natural handmade personal products company that helps women with dry skin glow from head to toe. I'm a champion for your self-care, business care, and intentional wellness.
Hi, y'all. I'm Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, coach, Amazon bestselling author, and dancing social worker who helps you upgrade your self and community care.
Yes, together we are a podcast rooted in the 8 dimensions of wellness and the co-founders of Women Connected in Wisdom community.
And we like to get together every week with expert guests for
Yes.
intentional conversations about how to be wise in business, relationships, and wellness. How do we do this?
How do we do it, right? And
Right?
this week we're talking about spiritual wellness. So I want to go ahead and give the definition so we can jump right in because I think it's going to be a really good conversation. Our Women Connected in Wisdom definition is spiritual wellness allows us to be in tune with our spiritual selves. This realm of wellness lets us find meaning in life events and define our own individual purpose. It can be defined through various factors, including religious faith, values, ethics, and morals. Regardless of whether you believe in a particular religious faith, there is always something to be learned about how you see yourself in the world.
Mm. I realized as you were reading that definition,
Yeah.
it's very fascinating because I love this definition, but I always realized we don't really talk about nature in there.
Hmm.
And a lot of our guests talk about nature. Us ourselves have part of that practice as part of our spiritual wellness practice. So I was
Yes.
just thinking about that. It was top of mind because day before yesterday, or was day
Hmm.
before yesterday. I was in Caprock Canyon State Park in
Mm,
Texas, and had one of the coolest experiences with nature that I've had in a while. They have a free roaming bison herd in Caprock Canyon. And we pulled up, and you know how you go to a state park and there's a visitor center, and
yes.
and we saw this grassy plains and we saw nothing. And I
Mhm.
thought, oh, we drove all this way and we're not going to see anything. And I go
Right.
in, and I meet the ranger, and she said, oh yeah, we got a 5 mile drive that you can drive
Mhm.
through the park. And people have been seeing bison all day, so your odds are really good, you know.
Mhm.
And they have over 300 bison in this park. So we
Wow.
like, it was wild, but what was wild was all the other things we saw in addition. So we saw prairie dogs, we saw tortoise, we saw a blue heron, we
Mm,
saw dragonflies.
mm,
Um, just it was very sacred. And then we get out. Now it was, I think, 105 or 107. So there weren't a lot of people around. Maybe
yeah.
people had more sense than we did to be. But we get out,
Strategic
we were in the
timing, yes.
shade, we had hats on, but I went out to this, it's a canyon, right?
Yeah.
And I went out to this canyon, and it was silent,
Mm.
except for you heard a little bit of the wind, and then you'd hear a buffalo grunt in the distance. And then you get a whiff above the woo, yeah. But I was just, as I was standing on that canyon, it was one of those moments, right, where you feel connected. You see the water, you feel the sky, you feel the wind on you. Like, it was just, woo. I was thinking about that as you read the definition.
Yeah. And when I think about spiritual wellness, for me, it's what keeps me anchored, right?
Mhm,
And like you said, connected to nature, connected to all of it is the things that you have to deal with that you didn't expect, right? The heat, you thought that your expectations weren't going to be met, right? You looked
mhm,
and your initial look at the situation said, there's nothing here for me, right? Are we sure we're even at the right place? And then to still get that piece of peace and everything that that moment gave to you, you had to get through a certain number of steps, and
mhm,
it took some things to get there, even with you guys driving together, all that led to it.
mhm,
And when I think about purpose and why things happen and being able to stay centered in the middle of everything, it's how in my religion, in my faith, God uses all that stuff to your
mhm,
benefit. Yes, these things happen, but you're not by yourself, right? And you can look into yourself to see, how does this make me feel, right? The heat, that makes me feel a certain type of way. Am I doing, right, what I can in my power? At the pool, I didn't have my hat. I needed my hat, right?
right.
You ladies had your hat, you had your
Mhm,
coconut water, you did what you could, and then that experience was able to give you that beautiful gift, and now you have that
right,
beautiful memory with your aunt. I love
right.
that.
Yeah, and I was also watching out for rattlesnakes at the same time, I have to tell
It's
you, because
important.
we were in West Texas.
And that's why I love, like, your
Just
nature
being
information,
real.
because I forgot about it. I'm thinking about bisons, and here's blue herrings and tortoises and possible
Y'all,
snakes to consider.
I didn't see any in the park, but I'm gonna say this one more thing before we pull out our guest. I was
Yeah,
driving, I can't remember where I was now, but I was somewhere in West Texas. And no lie, not exaggerating at all,
yeah.
6-foot rattlesnake crossing the road, like, huge. I was
Mm,
so thankful I was in a car
yeah.
and not out near it. Like, that freaks me out. Like,
And
I'm
it so what's on your list of things that freak you out? Snakes, what else? Spiders is on the list
mm.
for me. Like, spiders,
Spiders don't
I
freak me out, which
appreciate
we saw
them.
a tarantula. Like, there was a
Well,
tarantula coming across. It was
how
cool.
big was
I
it?
jumped up, of course, and I jumped out and started chasing it and
Uh,
video recording it, because
chasing it
of course I did, because Alex
other
would
way.
want the video. Now, I would not do that with a snake.
So
Snakes are
you're a
ones that
committed mother.
right? The things we
Mm,
do for our kids. And on the
right.
video, you hear me saying, "Oh, Alex would want me to bring this home," but no, darling, I'm not bringing it home. I'm just taking a video.
Wow. That's funny. And for me, it's interesting. We've been watching actually Obama's special on the
Mm.
national parks, right? And so we
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about
Don't you
the
love
start
his voice as he talks
love the
about
voice,
mm,
great
mm,
narrator. We talk about lead narrators with our audiobook, right?
right?
And what I love about the story is that the snake also had the space to cross the road. You had what you
Right?
needed to be protected, but in the national park, we're seeing all the different animals being able to thrive and get to where they need to go, you know? Yeah. And
Oh,
with
I
and
love
even with spiritual wellness, and this is my part of my focus this week, in asking for what you want. Yesterday we were at the farmers market and I was talking to Pharaoh about what happened to being president, right? How do you go from being president to narrating a special on national parks? And I said, maybe that, we talk about purpose and things that you want to do in life when you're looking at the list of things that you want to get done at whatever the end is that you see for yourself, right? He said, okay, I'm president, but I also love nature and I want to be a narrator. And so I love that the order that he did it, right? So that he can have as many viewers and stuff for his show, right? That's amazing. Because if Obama would have just been a narrator, we would remember him a lot differently.
right? It's
Yeah. And now him
fascinating to think about that.
and Michelle get to do books and tours, and maybe instead of just the presidency and the political impact that they had, it's also this.
Well, I think about when you say that, I think about Jimmy Carter, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
people can argue his politics all day long, and he is a
Yes.
one-term president, but
Mhm.
the amount of impact that he has had for the good for this world
Mm.
since like what he and Rosalind chose to do after their presidency has just changed lives all over the globe.
Yeah.
And I will say to folks who aren't local in Atlanta or Georgia, if you ever get the chance, and if you're local and haven't done it yet, the Carter Museum in Atlanta is so worth going and seeing the Presidential Library and
Mm.
seeing the impact that like one to two yes, and of course they have a platform, they were president for but I
Right.
think about that, right? Just the good we can do in the world from wherever we are. I love that, Shannon. I
Absolutely.
am ready to bring our expert guest up today. Are you?
Let's do it. Yes.
All right. I will read her bio and we'll pull her up on stage. Diane Hilleary is a psychotherapist and mindfulness instructor with more than 15 years' experience teaching skills and strategies to empower clients to find freedom from shame and live more compassionate lives. Diane is a teacher of the Mindful Self Compassion curriculum and
Mm.
founding director of the Atlanta Center for Self Compassion. And we are delighted to have her on our show today.
Yes.
Welcome,
Yes.
Diane.
Hi, Diane.
I'm so glad to be with y'all. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Happy to have you here, especially to talk about self-compassion is huge. When we talk about where we think we're supposed to be in life, where we actually are, and how we deal with ourselves.
Yes, self compassion is my passion. And I know we're talking a little about spiritual wellness today, which is,
Yes.
hand in hand with self compassion, but not my primary focus. But I was hoping I could bring my meditation teacher hat, my self compassion teacher hat, my psychotherapist hat, but also just kind of show up as a human today and share a
Yes.
little bit about my own spiritual journey.
Absolutely.
Mm. Yes to
So,
showing up as a human, Diane.
yeah.
Before
Right?
you get started, I want to, in full transparency, tell you Shannon and I have been on a book deadline recently, and we have been taking deep breaths and reminding ourselves to be compassionate with each other and
Yes.
the work and ourselves
Yeah.
because we generally will talk about it on the show. People hear us like we practice it. We practice what we preach. We
We
practice
do.
wellness. We practice self compassion. But
Yes.
man, when you hit a deadline or you
Mhm.
hit like life and caregiving and things like that. So
Yes.
I just want to put that into the space because I think it may come up as part of our conversation.
Mm.
Because when there's bumps in the road, whether that's with spiritual
Yes.
wellness or self compassion, how do we address that sometimes?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is when the rubber, hits the road. I don't even know if that's how the saying goes, but you
I
know what
think
I
it
mean.
is.
When you're
Yes.
in the crunch time,
Mhm.
that's when you need self compassion more than ever and when it's a real challenge.
Yes.
Well, so what I wanted to share about today is my experience from my spiritual journey of going from sort of looking outside of myself for the answers, thinking like, how can I be the best parent? Let me read all the parenting books. And even in my role as a psychotherapist, people are coming to me, as a mental health expert, and there's sort of this, power differential of like, can I show up in the room as a human, and where I'm a, supporter of them finding their inner answers. And I think in the past there was a lot of pressure to say, I have the answers. Let me give you advice to help you fix what you're
Mm.
struggling with. And feeling, that's not how I want to be, but having some pressure to be that way. So this pull between, are the answers outside of me, are they inside of me, has been such a big part of my journey.
Yes.
Especially, I don't know if you all have talked about on the podcast. Have you talked about highly sensitive people? Is that a topic you've
We
done?
have. We have had folks on, and
Yes.
Cynthia Winton Henry, who is the co-founder of Interplay, has done a
Yes.
lot of work around highly sensitive people. So we've mentioned it. I don't know that we've done a deep dive into it. So say more about it, Diane.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah. So I identify as a highly sensitive person. And the way that showed up for me as a kid was that I was overwhelmed. Like we would walk into a family party and I would be hiding behind someone's leg or rush off alone. And so there was, I had the perception that my high needs could be frustrating to the adults in my life, could feel overwhelming to them. And that my shyness, and there was a joke in my family that I never smiled until I was 6. And I think that's a sign of just being in freeze, feeling overwhelmed. So when you have that, very sensitive nervous system, and I think the research, in the past, I've heard the numbers to be 15 to 20% of folks have that high sensitivity. I think we're moving maybe more towards 30 now.
I
And
would
so
not
it's
be
just
surprised, and especially after the last 3 years.
right. Yes. I hear from a lot of people that it's getting more intense over the last few years, that their sound sensitivity is getting more intense. Um, so it could be, sensory things like lights and sound and touch, and then also feeling emotions more intensely, and just having that, nervous system that's easily knocked out of whack. And so for me, what that created for me in childhood was this experience of, I'm not getting it right. Like I can't do the right kind of smile. I can't do the right kind of gratitude. And I sort of, had the storyline that has stayed with me until the past few years, when I've been able to shake it loose, that I'm just a bad
Right.
person. Like no matter what I would be like, I would say, to my partner, to my friends, oh my gosh, I totally messed this up. Do you think that makes me a bad person? And they would be like, what are you talking about? Obviously not.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I see what you're saying logically, but it still feels that way. So why is this so persistent?
Yes.
Um, and so with my spiritual journey, going to like vacation Bible school and things like that as a childhood, and hearing the message of, you're a sinner, and here's how you can be saved. That what that ended up doing for me was just getting plugged into, I'm a bad person. So
Right.
instead of hearing the grace and the social justice and the love and the beauty, I
Mhm.
just ended up hearing the, oh, like this, it is true, I am a bad person, and if I follow all these external rules, then I can learn how to be a good person. And
That
so
makes sense.
yeah, it's confusing because there's such a message of, love and grace. And I, lived in a Christian community just after I graduated from college. We raised our daughter in that community for her first 5 years of life. And there was so much beauty there. And yet, through the trajectory of my spiritual journey, really needing to get free from, like, there's something outside of myself, was such an
Yes.
important, like the external authority.
It's very
Um,
important.
and so then just in 2020, I had this experience of being able to, because of the pandemic and circumstances, what you were just saying, Shannon, about like when you're in the thick of it and there's heat and there's all of this, how do you find your inner peace still?
Right.
Um,
Yes.
so circumstances that I would look back on and say, okay, there was some magic there, but at the time were pretty complicated and painful.
Yes.
Brought us to living on Tybee Island with extended family
Mm.
during the pandemic. And so it was like everything was, quiet, and still people weren't allowed on the beaches at that time. So I
Mm.
got to watch the sunset every night, and, be on quiet beaches and walk along the marsh and talk about, herons and turtles and dolphins. It was
Wow.
really magical and amazing. And so getting this chance to feel that connection, feel like, oh, I'm a part of this, and there's magic here and there's stillness. Just gave me, the difference between looking for these, this external authority or these external answers. Who are the experts and how can I follow them and sort of earn my worthiness, to this sense of like quiet and stillness. How can I find these answers inside of me? So that's been such an important part of what I've shifted in my work with clients as well, is how can I help clients tune into their inner knowing? Have you all heard
Mm.
of, were you going to say something, Christine? Go ahead.
I wanted to ask a question for our listeners.
Hmm.
So say somebody's listening, because this sounds magical in my body, Diane, and I've had some of those experiences. But say somebody is listening and says, okay, how do I even start? How do I start to find that stillness within myself and start to listen to my inner voice? Because, there's a lot of outer voices. We get a lot of information through TV, through the internet, through this podcast, through, that's the good information, y'all. But, you know, I can't remember what the current statistic is, but thousands of energy images and thousands of input every day. And
Yes.
so how do we quiet that and
Hmm.
tap into our own inner sense of knowing?
Yes, that is an excellent question. Um, I would say some of the things that helped me were create working with my limiting beliefs. So self compassion was a huge part of this for me. I think it's a lot about intention. So if we start with, I'm setting an intention to listen more to my inner knowing, and we just set that intention and we sort of put it out there. That's a part of my overall theme here, is trusting that when we set an intention, we're planting that seed and allowing it to play out. And so when we can start with that intention, and I like to also use ritual. So I might light a can I might say, like, okay, I want to listen more to my inner knowing. Let me look and see what would help me remember that. And so maybe I find a candle and I write intuition with a pencil into the candle, or inner knowing. um, and then I light the candle for a minute when I wake up in the morning, and I just say, may I listen to my inner knowing today. Another piece for me is working with energy. I think being such a highly sensitive person means that I didn't even know how to listen to my inner knowing, because I was just soaking up other people's energy all the time. And so once I started learning about energy hygiene and thinking, like, okay, I know how to ground my energy, whether it's with yoga squats or with imagining tree roots coming out through my feet into the ground, or having my bare feet in the earth. Knowing how to ground my energy was an important part of it. And then knowing how to clear my energy. So I love to do you want me to lead a little energy clearing practice?
I would love
Oh,
that. Let's
yes,
do it.
please.
Okay. All right, let's do it. So closing your eyes for a moment, and just imagine that you're standing under a waterfall, and it's just the right temperature and pressure. And as you take a few deep breaths here, just imagine the water falling all around you and clearing away anything that you feel ready to release. The water is falling around your head and your neck, your shoulders, and your torso, clearing away and releasing any stuck energy that you're ready to let go of. Letting that water wash down all the way through your whole torso and down into your legs. And just feeling that stuck energy, anything that's ready to be released, draining right out through the bottoms of your feet into the earth, who receives and recycles this energy so that we can have more space for what we're calling forward. And coming back whenever you feel ready. So, what did you
Thank
notice? Did you feel
you.
anything with that? How did it
Mm,
I
feel?
just noticed relaxation in my
yeah.
body, as like a relaxing of my shoulders, a presencing of what I was carrying and consciously letting it go. I just
Mm-hmm.
noticed relaxation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was surprising for me that I immediately went somewhere like, where is this little cove with this waterfall that I knew where it was, you know? Um,
Wow.
and I usually think of Christine and I, when we talk about letting go of energy, I think about cutting people's expectations, their threads of energy on the front of myself and the back of myself. I
Mm-hmm.
love the thought of water running and rushing over my body. And then I imagine, like, when you're standing in the water and the sand below your feet gets pulled by the current, right? When you said it's receiving it and recycling it,
Mhm.
it wasn't even touching me anymore. Like the sand took it and now it's in the ocean, and gone to the next person that it could help.
I
Mm.
love
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
I love that idea of thinking of like energy doesn't disappear, so the earth
Right.
can transform it. So sometimes I'll specifically send my energy to the trees in my on my land, and
Mhm.
that, that it's going to be used for something magical once I release it. I don't need to be
Right.
holding on to it because it
Mm.
has another use out there.
I love
I
that.
love that, Diane. I have a friend of mine who is an elder in the Lumbee tribe, and she very clearly told me that I want to share with our listeners. If you're releasing energy to the trees, make sure it's hardwood trees. That because hardwood trees can handle it much better than softwood trees. So
Oh,
things like
yeah.
oak trees and yeah, it was a good no. It was a good noticing and a knowing for me when she taught me that because
Yeah.
it's like, well, of course there are different trees that can handle different things.
Mhm.
Kay Lyle says, "Wow, I felt so calm with the energy clearing. I would love that daily."
Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
Me
And
too.
and so I want to share too, Christine, because I think that what you asked is a great question, right? And Diane, I do the same type of thing in the morning. You right? You said if I light this candle in the morning and set my intention, then it's different. For me, when I hear you talking about a highly sensitive person, if I don't take my me time and I'm straight to emails and social media and the news and what I don't almost even want to go through the list of stuff that makes me feel that way. I feel like it's taking me out the calm energy I was just at the beach, right?
Mm.
If I do not, I consider it tuning myself. If I do
Yes.
not set the intention and set the tune for the day and make sure I'm at least in tune, then every other tune that comes is the outside authority that because I did not stake my own, that space is taken up by all this other stuff. So that's huge for
Yes.
me in the beginning of the day too.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
been talking a lot lately about I planted 2 gardens this summer,
Mm.
and one is a fairy garden that is very fun and
What's
brings
a
lots of
fairy
joy.
garden?
I just added some, magical elements. I put in like a hummingbird stake and a cardinal stake, and just sort of invited, more joy, like kind of
Yes.
a nod to the nature spirits on the land, and have a little fairy chime hanging above. So just bringing joy and magic into the
Yeah. I love that. And what's the other garden that you planted?
The other one is just different kind of flowers, and I haven't ever been much of a gardener, but as I'm trying to connect with nature more, the other reason I planted it is because I've been thinking a lot about um, tending to my internal landscape. So I love what you
Mm.
said, tuning in, like thinking
Yes.
that I'm an instrument, and if
Yes.
I don't tune myself daily, then my instrument is going to be off key and out of
Mhm.
whack.
Yes.
And thinking about that, with a garden, I'm going out each day and watering it. I'm checking on the fencing, the boundaries, making sure the four-legged friends are not able to get
Hmm.
into it.
Yes.
Um, so what inside myself do I need to maybe do some weeding, do
Right.
some planting of
Right.
seeds,
Right.
tending, making sure the water and the light, and that was a huge part with self-compassion is moving from, I've had this feeling like I'm never enough, I'm inadequate, I'm a bad person, to, what instead of like, what should I be doing to fix that? Like, what should I be
Mhm.
doing today? What do other people need from me today? And moving to this question of, what do I need? What, if I look inside myself and I say, okay, there's some pain, there's sadness in here, how can I be with that? And so having
Mm.
specific, I have this sort of collection of practices that we do in my morning tune into you meditation.
Mm.
That's a group that folks are welcome to, check out. It's a
Yes.
daily meditation from 8:30 to 9 on Zoom.
Mm.
So some of the practices are a soften, soothe, allow, which is where we just tune in with, okay, I'm feeling sad. Let me soften into that in my body, allow it to be there, and see what kind of soothing it needs.
Yes.
And my sadnesses are going to need a different kind of soothing than yours. And so being able to listen to myself and have that pause, which goes back to your question, Christine, of how do we make that space? It is needing structure and community, to help us, create those pauses in our life so that we can listen in. Because I was so full of other people's information and images and expertise that I didn't even know how to answer the question of what do I need. So it's kind of an
Mm.
ongoing journey to figure that out.
I
Yes.
love that. And before we go on, Diane, if people want to join your daily meditation, how do they
Yes.
find that? And we'll put it in our show notes also.
Yeah, so the on the Atlanta Center
Cool.
for Self-Compassion website, which is atlantaselfcompassion.com, there's a under services, you click on that and it should highlight meditation or mindfulness services, and there's the Tune Into You meditation. And people can also find us on social media at Atlanta Self Compassion.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Yes. And when you talk about the authority outside of yourself, I think that's huge. Yes, and for the viewers, we have this at the bottom scrolling across if you want to grab it to participate from 8:30 to 9 every day. But I think that's huge, especially for women, right? Because we are told that somebody else is the expert, ask somebody else. And again, coming from childhood, one thing that stood out for me that I've learned from women from our Manifestation Mondays group was asking or telling the child what's going on, right? For example, we had a new grandmother in the group, and she's sharing that before we do anything with her body, we're telling her what's going on when we're changing her diaper. And I was like, wow, I hadn't thought about it, and
Mm,
we see people just do whatever they want with babies, and babies cannot necessarily communicate the way we communicate, right? And that continues. Like you said, you're going into a social situation, there's a party, we're opening the door, and Diane, say hi, say, and it's, wait a minute, what about what does Diane need in this situation? You know what I mean?
yeah,
And it being okay. I want to be next to my mom today, and that's okay because that's where
yeah.
I'm at. So giving that space, even from a very young age, I was really grateful to hear that they were doing that with their granddaughter, because it's true. Just allow people to be where they are and to meet them there and support from what they need.
Yeah, I heard this. I heard something that we're in the middle of a paradigm shift with parenting. The shift from we're building a house, and the house needs four windows and a door and a roof, and that's sort of how the parenting was before. Like, well, this is what a child should know and should be and should do.
Right.
To this planting a garden. Like, what does this child need? What kind of light? Where do they need to be planted? What kind of support do they need? And it seems like that the self-compassion piece has really helped me with that too, shifting again from what should I be doing, what's the right thing to do, like
Mhm.
what is a good person, what is it like to be a good mom, how do I be a good therapist, and
Mhm.
instead saying and this comes back to the imaginal cells. Have you heard of those inside
No,
caterpillars?
no, imaginal cells.
Imaginal, isn't that such a great
Okay.
name? So
Yeah, what are
caterpillars
they?
have imaginal cells, and those are
Okay.
the cells that have the blueprint of the butterfly they're going to become. So
Mhm.
these cells, there's cells for the wings and cells for the other parts of a butterfly, whatever those are.
Right.
And so thinking of that we have this blueprint inside of us, and
Yeah.
so if I excavate inside myself and figure out, listen deeply to myself and think, what are my values, they're going to be different answers from yours and different from Christine's. And a lot of us arrive in adulthood with a set of values that are more cultural or familial, and
Mhm.
then we begin to realize, wait a minute, are those even my values? Is that really? And
Been there.
so
Yes.
that's when that
Yeah.
tuning in and that listening in and having that a supportive community that helps us find the space to listen to ourselves,
Yeah.
because we have this blueprint inside of us, and it's just a matter of clearing out the noise
Right.
and getting still enough so that we can listen in to our imaginal selves, so that we know what lights my soul on fire, what is my
Absolutely.
purpose, what are my values,
Yeah.
and just figuring out how to get those answers inside of ourselves.
And for me, I'm thinking about the chapter, and I'm writing 2 chapters for volume 2, right? And one of them is about this continuous workflow that no matter which department, whether it's finance or your product or your service that you're working on, this is what you do, right? And the first part is the plan, and the second part is to communicate. And still to Christine's question, because I think it's a great question of how do you stop and create the space for you to establish that inner authority? For me, it's okay, like you said, Diane, I woke up and I'm kind of feeling sad, or I'm kind of feeling, I have an emotion. Eileen in volume 2 is talking about emotions, right? This emotion came up. Why am I upset? And
Mhm.
then it's my responsibility to communicate it. when we're talking about our group and the people that we have to work with, now that's the question, right? How is it received when we communicate it? Do we have the verbiage? Have we taken the time within ourselves to sit with it, to soften and have grace with ourselves?
Yeah.
Self compassion, but say, hey, I'm sad about this. Hey, this
Hmm.
hurt my feeling, or I'm upset. And now when you communicate it, what happens? Right? For me, in my work environments, it wasn't always received. So I said, hey, I don't feel like I'm able to give honest feedback. When that wasn't taken and physically dangerous situations are still happening, I chose to now I have to remove myself because I've tried to communicate. And in my inner authority, I want to be a great communicator as a manager. I want to make sure the other women and other team members are safe. If I cannot do that for myself, I do not feel like my inner authority is going to be listened to in the team. So I have to remove myself. And that
Hmm.
is how I kept my inner peace, even though I might have loved my position and loved what I did. If it's going to go against that, and now it's taking away my inner peace and what I need to stay grounded, like you said, then I need to keep going.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and I do that with everything, personal relationships, and my group now is amazing at receiving
Mhm.
feedback because stuff is going to happen. When you have two different people and, our teams are bigger than two usually, you put a couple of personalities in, there's going to be things to work through, to get used to learn from each other and to learn about each other.
Mhm.
But for me, that's what's made it really easy to stay in that grounded place with Women Connected in Wisdom, with Shalo Glow, my shea butter company, and that's part of how I ground myself, right? Coming back to my body every day and seeing, okay, after the day happened, this is what you need to heal, this is where you are, and this is how you're going to set yourself up for the next day. And so
Yeah.
that's been working out really well.
And I think as women, when we get those cultural messages, whether
Mhm.
it's for me, I think the combination of being a girl and a highly sensitive person,
Yes.
and everybody's going to have their own unique, family, generational
And
trauma and family
combination
story,
of stuff. Yeah.
cultural. Um, but when we are getting those messages of, oh no, oh no, you're overreacting. Don't be so sensitive,
Right.
and so then it's very confusing to know how to listen to our inner answers because we're getting this external feedback of your inner answers are wrong.
Right.
The way you're expressing your feelings is not appropriate, is not welcome here. So then we have a lot of layers that we, have built up, a lot of protective shell
Yeah.
that is like, I don't even know how to know what I'm feeling because I blocked it out because I was discouraged from expressing it. And so there's a
That's a
lot of
great point.
peeling back that we have to do with that. So I love what you were
Yeah.
you were describing, that experience of like, I kept having this, this doesn't feel right to me. And that's how
Right.
we, and sort of noticing this doesn't feel right to me. But then I have a part that comes in and says, oh, but maybe you're making too big of a deal, or maybe
Right.
this. And that's
Right.
where that quietness and that self-compassion practice helps us say, if it doesn't feel right to me, that's important information. And how
That's
can
what it
I be
is.
with that? Even if I'm not
Yeah.
ready to express it out yet, how can I be with it in a way that's compassionate and bring that presence to
And
that?
honoring to everybody. And I love that you said that because that is where I sifted, right? And I don't think I knew what sifting was before I was a kitchen manager. And we had flour on the cook line, right? And we sifted to make sure that it's the best breading for our fried items. And that's how I take information. And so I can see with you saying that sometimes it might be, well, I felt like a bad person, but no, this person is a bad person. Well,
Mhm.
that's not necessarily the case, right? Maybe they're either responsible for giving you that feedback because they're going to stay in the conversation with you, or that's how they feel about it. Maybe it's coming from a place of love, whatever it is, right? But now what I do is now I sift it. Maybe my expectations were wrong. Maybe
Mhm.
I needed that piece of feedback to grow in the perspective. Maybe I was immature or naive and they just helped me grow. But if it's not that, and I was right because I sat with it and thought about it before I brought it to that person, then I can
Mhm.
sift it and say, I appreciate you having this conversation with me. This is still how I feel in this
Mhm.
situation. Let's say for work, I still feel unsafe. I don't, from the habit, see that it's going to change, and that because of
Mhm.
that, this is my next step. And
Yeah.
so I hear what you're saying. Yeah. And sifting it has made it so much easier, and to still be able to keep this relationship, build on this relationship if it's necessary, right? Or leave it with respect and not burning bridges and not taking myself out of the character that I choose to operate in when I tune myself and, as we go on through with the projects and the character that we want to carry on in every day.
One of the practices I love for what you're talking about is another energy practice that I do, because we did grounding and we did
Yes.
clearing, and the third piece for me is protecting my energy. So
Mm.
like when I go into being a highly sensitive person going into a shopping mall, it's like
Yes.
10 minutes in and I'm like melting with total exhaustion. And so just thinking about, can I imagine myself surrounded with, sometimes what I'll do is I'll breathe in and sort of imagine like a ball of light here that's my own energy, my heart light,
Mm.
and I'll breathe it out so that it's all around me, and then imagine like a veil coming down over it and just saying, may everything that's for my good come through, and anything that's other people's energy, may it bounce off with love back to them. But
Yeah.
sometimes I'll also picture it like I'm a disco ball and I'm outward facing mirrors all over. And I'll say, anything that comes towards me that's not for my highest good or that's not unconditional love, may it bounce right off my disco ball,
Yeah.
mirror it back to that person for their personal growth,
Yes.
right back to
Yes.
you. It's bouncing off of me. Because
Hello.
it's hard, right? When I'm trained to be like a pleaser,
Yes.
then I'm like, oh, it's scary to
Yes.
get, negative feedback or to be in conflict. And so
I hear
I
you.
like I
I
like being
love that disco ball.
Yeah.
I love the thought of dancing with it, right? What
yes.
I often use, Diane, is I imagine stepping into a hula hoop and lifting that up like a giant bubble over my head.
I love
I have a
I
picture
like
from
that.
years ago that was an app that showed me dancing in a bubble, like it looked like a so I sometimes I have trouble visualizing things. So that
mhm.
helps me to visualize. The disco ball helps me to visualize. I like that. Thank you
Yeah.
for that tool. That is
Yeah.
fabulous.
The other thing that I think is a part for me of tuning into myself is that it just brings more magic. And so, yeah, I loved how you said, Shannon, like asking for what you want. And I was thinking
Yeah.
of that not just with, being able to narrate an amazing nature documentary, but
Right.
also each day sort of asking, like, what do I want to receive from the
Yeah.
universe, from nature,
Yes.
from not just from people, but just energetically. And so
Mhm.
I had a really difficult day recently that I was anticipating. I knew it was going to be a hard day. And
Yeah.
so I asked, my mom is in spirit, not here on this earth anymore. So I asked her to send me rainbows so that I would know that she and my angels and guides were with me. And
Yes.
so I wasn't sure, I was open to like a rainbow decal, or so I saw my niece that morning and she had a little thing on her crock, those little like
Yes. The little things they put in the little holes. Yeah.
yes, that was my first rainbow. And then
Mm.
throughout the day, there was a beautiful rainbow in Athens, Georgia that day. And like three different people sent me a picture of it. And
Mhm.
then another friend sent me a picture of a rainbow in Baltimore. And it was just like an explosion of love and support, for my mom and the universe. So that kind of magic, I just think there's more space for that. And another example is I was having a really busy day in the middle of the pandemic. There were so many people seeking therapy during that time. So I was, back to back often for days in a row, and not listening very much to my own inner knowing telling me you're working too much. And so I woke up one morning and the power was out on the whole island. And the news was, the word on the island was that it was going to be out all day. So speaking of, you were telling that story earlier, Christine, about the power being out,
Mhm.
when it's a small town, it can be
Yes.
the whole town. So
Mm.
I canceled all of my clients and then the power immediately came back on. And so in the past, I might have been like, oh, I'm such a, I feel guilty because I disappointed my clients, or I need the money, kind of that scarcity mindset. But I was like,
Yes.
look at this. I've just been given a free day. So
Yes.
I took my white husky Noko out for a walk. And there was a woman across the street that I'd never seen before walking her white husky.
Mm.
So I tend to be shy and not usually chatty on my dog walks, but I was like, this is kind of a magical day. So I'm just going to go say hi. And she
Yeah.
was wearing this shirt that said, trust your journey. And we struck up a conversation, and she was a former therapist who, was immediately started sharing about her spiritual journey. And we
Yeah.
just had this amazing magical connection. And it was that feeling of like, the universe shut down the power on the whole island to give me a day off and a chance to connect with this beautiful other soul on my walk. So
Yes.
that kind of joy, is a part of, I think, this like tuning into ourselves and connecting to our inner landscape and noticing when we're sad and tending to that, so there's more room for
Yes.
joy.
And round of applause for you for not calling everybody back and refilling up your schedule. Okay. Yes.
Let's talk some truth there, because it went through all of our minds. Like we were like, do you do that? Do you not do that? Proud of you, Diane, for going for that walk.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that's this lens of like looking at like, okay, here's an obstacle. Is there any magic here? Like what is my inner knowing telling me? What do
Yeah.
I need? How can I navigate this? And just having that deeper connection with myself.
Mhm.
Mm,
And it's like, what is sometimes for me a question that I use to sift it too is it an obstacle? Right? Sometimes
Mhm.
it doesn't even touch us. Like for example, in traffic, a lot of people have road rage and mad at this
Mhm.
person, mad at that person. But if you were just calmly going at the speed limit a little bit before it and were paying attention to everything, what it actually mattered what they did, or you just upset it and talking about it, and a lot of
Right.
times life can be like that too. Okay, this is a huge situation, it's brought to your attention, but does it actually affect your life? If it does, could it benefit you? What if it's different?
Mhm.
Especially because I believe that everything happens for our good. And when you talk about the way that things fall together, I used to say, oh, that's crazy, right? What is the likelihood that she has a white husky, this is her
Mhm.
shirt? And because it's so specific, especially when you ask for things like the rainbows, that's when I started saying it's strategically orchestrated,
Mhm.
right? And that's where I am with spiritual wellness. Nothing is by mistake. Everything is strategically orchestrated for your good. And it's even those conversations sometimes that I've had that have been difficult with people who we might not end up on the same page at the end of the conversation and might have ended up on different teams after that. I still
Mhm.
think that was for our good. So
Yeah, totally. Lately, I've been thinking of it like, if I want to strengthen my, muscles, then I take myself to the gym and lift some weights. And so
right.
when I have a hard conversation, I try to think, I like the phrase, how could this be for me, happening for me instead of to
mm,
me?
Yes.
And
mm.
so I think like, all right, I'm taking myself to the gym for my, conflict resolution skills or for my, struggle skills or, whatever it is. I'm just like, this is a chance to practice.
Yes, I
Right?
love that. And what's really interesting to me, especially with a degree in psychology, and I've thought, how am I going to, well, not that I've thought, how am I going to use it? That's what people ask. I see how I've used it in every position I've been in, right?
Mhm.
I really appreciate you sharing how sitting in that chair, you struggled with feeling like you were stopping people from trusting their inner authority. You know what I mean? And I could see
Mhm.
how that might be a practice in that career field.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the work that you've done for yourself and sharing what works now so that, people can have a beautiful spiritual journey, but also say, hey, you as that person in that journey, you have spiritual authority. You
Yeah.
were given, the gifts that you were given for a reason, and they're not supposed to be second to everybody else that just so happens to be in your life because that's for your good. So you are first, and then they're all complementary to that journey.
Yeah, I'm just a consultant and I can tell
Right.
you what I know about mental health and then you tell me what you know about you.
Yeah.
And, you're the expert on you. So I'm here to listen and create space for whatever's trapped inside of you that's ready to come out.
Absolutely. So when you think about your journey and what you're doing specifically this week in spiritual wellness for your is wisdom in action, what are you working on?
I would say this week I am working on self-expression. So the more I listen into my inner knowing, I'm practicing how do I get it from my heart out into the world with as much compassion and connection with others as possible.
Oh, I
Self-expression.
love that, Diane. Hashtag self-expression.
Yes. What about you,
Mm.
Christine? What are you working on this week?
One of the phrases that Diane, you said early on in the podcast was listen to your inner knowing. So I think I'm going to go hashtag listen to your inner knowing for my wisdom in action this week. Because you said it earlier how we have these practices, we have these tools, and sometimes we're in the midst of big stuff. We forget or we don't. So just really starting the day with that and starting the day with the listen to your inner knowing. What about you, Shannon?
I'm along the same line, right? Earlier I said ask for what you need. I think mine is along the same line as yours though, and listen in. Right? I think that I've been doing a great job at listening to the inner knowing. It's something I've worked on for a long time. And especially because of the way that my businesses are set up, that's my goal for all of the audiences that I work with. And so I think it's been something that has been good. And it's a question for me now in my spiritual wellness. Am I listening to myself too much? Or am I listening to what God wants me to do and making sure that I'm in alignment? So listen in to both God, to the women around me, and my authors, my teams that I'm working on, to make sure I'm in alignment and not um, creating too much space for the authority. I think that's important for my authority. I think that's important too, for it to be balanced and healthy, you know.
Mhm.
And I think I'm doing good, but I am intentionally making sure that I listen in and doing my devotion and giving that time at the beginning of the day so I can be quiet and be in tune the correct way.
Mm, I
Love that.
love it.
Yes, thank
Diane,
you so
thank you
much.
so much for being here with us today and sharing your
Yes,
knowledge and your wisdom about spiritual wellness with our audience. If folks want to get in touch with you, want to learn more about what you do, is the best way for them to check out atlantaselfcompassion.com? Oh,
Yeah, they can also email me, and it's just Diane at atlantaselfcompassion.com. But you
oh,
can, if you reach out to me through the website, that'll get to me too.
and we'll put that in our show notes for our listeners if they want to check that out. And we put a link in our show notes directly to that daily meditation that you mentioned too. So
Awesome.
yes,
Thank you so
thank you
much.
so much
you're
for being
welcome.
with us. We are grateful to be connected and we
Yes,
look forward to talking more.
Yeah,
yes,
thank you both for having me. I love this wellness emphasis that you're putting out into the world. So thank you
thank
for all
you.
the good work you're doing.
Absolutely,
Thank
you
you.
too.
Oh my
Mm,
goodness.
yes, so important.
Whew. I
Yes,
think that energy clearing that she did at the beginning, like I'm still feeling relaxed after that.
I do feel good. And I had been
Right?
wanting to. I had just told Pharaoh, I need some more Palo Santo. I need to like let it go, you know? So it was great. Yeah.
Right? And it
Yeah.
also makes me, as much as I love doing it in my imagination and how helpful it was, it
Hmm.
also makes me want to go up to North Georgia and find a waterfall to stand under too.
I'm definitely
Maybe
doing it.
that's how we reward
Yeah.
ourselves after the book's turned in,
Mhm.
right?
Ooh, we could
That
talk
would
about
be
it.
a good reward. Go
Let's
clean
talk
all
about
the deadlines off. I love
Yeah,
that.
and I mean, I try to really do it all the time. You know, just like every day when I come back and I refresh myself, I'm putting on Shalo Glow because I can't sleep if I'm dry, right? I'm putting it on. I'm letting go of all of that stuff. I'm not trying to hold grudges. I'm not trying to hold anybody longer than they're supposed to be held in this conversation or this
Mhm,
season. And again, the root of it is also, I'm not trying to get sick. That's where I believe
mhm,
chronic illness and stress, and we're not doing that. So we're gonna let it go. But
mm,
we could definitely go to a waterfall. I'm down to chase some
right?
waterfalls with you, yeah.
Wouldn't that oh, you know that's one of my favorite hobbies is chasing
Yes.
waterfalls. So
Especially reading your chapter about the nature and stuff. I can't wait for this book
right?
to come out, yeah.
Oh, it's going to be so fun. All right, my friend, anything our listeners need to know before we close episode 122? Is there anything that we need to share?
I
Upcoming,
don't
if you're
think so.
listening live,
Yes,
Women Connected in Wisdom will be in South Carolina, in Columbia, South Carolina, this Saturday at
yes,
All Good Books. And we have a group of authors that are going to be there signing books
yes,
and telling some wellness stories. And we'd love to meet you in person. And anything else that
yes, and that's at 6 PM, 6 PM
that is
Eastern
6
Time,
p.m.
so
Yep.
come join us. Yes, we've been
Come
having a great time
join
at the book
us.
signings.
Right. And
Yeah,
check out womenconnectedinwisdom.com. Find out what we're up to and what's going on. And we'd love to stay connected with you.
yes, yes, and again, thank you so much for joining us. In the meantime, be well, be wise, be whole. We'll see you soon.
Peace.
Peace.